All right, everyone. Hello, and thank you for joining the March edition of the ServeNowEDU webinar series. This is our third EDU webinar, and we're excited to say that we've been gaining a lot of traction with these webinars. Nearly 90 process serving professionals are registered for this particular session, and our recordings of these webinars are getting a lot of plays after they've been published. So you can see these webinars on our website, which I'll tell you a little bit more about here later in the webinar. ServeNowEDU allows us to add value to your ServeNow and ServeManager memberships and provides a way for us to give back to the process serving community. If this is your first EDU webinar, they're held on the last Thursday of every month and feature a wide variety of topics. Thus far, we've mostly talked about technology, but we'll be covering all aspects of the process serving industry and running a business over time as we have more and more webinars. If you haven't signed up for our April webinar yet, Jeff Karakin of One Legal will be talking about electronic service of process, which is always a hot topic. So do that when you get a chance. Go to Serve Now and click on the EDU section. Our guest today is Paula Ashcraft. She is the CEO of Green Tree Legal out of Ohio. Paula is a longtime friend and customer of ServeNow. She has 22 years of experience in the legal support industry. She's the current president of the Ohio Professional Process Server Association, and she's on the compliance committee with NAPS, the National Association. Paula sold her first legal support firm in 2006 to a large company that services the default and financial space. And she worked with that firm for a while and recently has started Green Tree in 2015. She's starting Green Tree Legal from the ground up with compliance as the foundation. And today, Paula is going to talk about where compliance is coming from, what makes a process serving firm compliant, and why you should embrace compliance, as well as how to get started with it. So with that long intro, Paula, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. Is there anything that I missed in the intro that you'd like to say about yourself or the company?
No, I think you covered it. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about this compliance stuff. So I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks for donating your time and your knowledge. I know you've spent a lot of time over the last year or so trying to wrap your head around compliance and what that means for your company. So I'll let the audience know that they can ask questions along the way. I'll try to monitor them as best as I can during the conversation. And if I don't get to them right away, I will, there'll certainly be time at the end where I'll be going through any questions that everyone has. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Paula, when we talk about compliance for the legal industry and specifically for process servers, what does that mean? How can you summarize that?
I would say compliance started in the legal community. It first started with the banks. There was a series of events that happened where the banks, the government regulated the banks with some compliance policies that they needed to put in place. And it took them quite a bit of time to do that. And once they had their compliance in place, they started turning to the law firms and requiring the law firms to put some of those similar policies in place within the law firms. And then once that was done, they required the law firms to sign service level agreements that said that they would also in turn have a vendor management component to that. So that's when the process serving companies started being requested to have compliance in place for, the law firms were signing agreements with their clients that said that yes, their vendors are compliant and they do have, a series of things in place to protect. It basically comes down to protecting consumer data and making sure that personal information is being protected in a way that, there's not going to be any security breaches and so forth.
Right. So that kind of answers or gets me into my next question is, why compliance for process servers? Why are they being asked about what type of compliance management exists within their companies? Can you talk about how the notion of these vendor management policies are trickling down to process serving firms?
So the law firms are being asked to do a lot of things and a lot of time-consuming, very costly, productivity-wise, costly things that they're having to put in place, and they're not allowed to do work with vendors that don't have some of the same protections in place. So when your clients are asking for specific things, it may seem as if they're being, picky, or they're just asking for things that don't seem like they would be appropriate to your business, but they're only asking many times because their clients are requiring them to have those things. So, so if somebody asks you, do you have a business continuity plan? It's not because the attorneys really care whether you have one. I mean, now they are understanding what it means to manage a network of vendors, and they would like to know that when they're sending you files that you're able to still conduct business in the event of, like a natural disaster or something like that. So they do want to work with vendors that have particular processes in place that protect not only consumer data, but just also IT security has become very, very important. So, and it's all trickling down. I mean, their clients are requiring it of them, and they are in turn are requiring it of us. And then now folks that we're forwarding papers to may not necessarily have a financial law firm, so to speak, as a client, but they might be receiving some work from Green Tree Legal. And that's what we consider our fourth party or our vendor management part of our compliance. And so we're starting to ask things of our network that may seem, a bit daunting when somebody receives a compliance packet from us, but just know that we're being asked for those things, and that's where it starts.
Right. Yeah, we're going to definitely jump into some of the details of how third and fourth parties are being impacted and kind of what all this means to them here in a little bit. But so obviously when we're talking about, default and collection, those are the primary areas where you're really starting to see compliance. Are there other areas, other types of clients or jurisdictions that are requiring some level of compliance?
I see it happening mostly in areas where the attorneys practice in some type of consumer debt collection, whether it's mortgage or credit card collection. Those are the hot areas right now. But across the board, law firms are being asked to produce, lots of IT security policies and so forth. So I think it's getting its start in the collection and the default mortgage area, but I really see it encompassing many more areas of law as we progress through this process. Because many firms, they might have one division of mortgage foreclosure, but they do many other things. So some of the civil litigation firms are starting to want just some best practices in place and things like that. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
Right. And I guess just to be clear, when we're talking about compliance here, we're not necessarily talking about the nice to have type things that you're getting out of your software. We're not talking about, GPS and transparency and those and photos of the address and those sorts of things. We're talking about, really having policies in place that are going to be the foundation of managing your business.
Yes, it's not only having those policies, it's if you treat your policies like a moving document and they're constantly being reviewed, updated, it's not just having policies and then putting them on the shelf and letting them collect dust. It's the manner in which, if you look at compliance and a compliance management system, it would be having all those policies, the manner in which you train your employees, and then continue to update those policies and make sure that they're relevant. And they're moving documents. They certainly, almost as soon as we put together our business continuity plan on who we're going to call within the first hour of being down and that kind of thing, I mean, that document changed the next week, so it's and it's the same with our IT security and things like that. You just always want to make sure you're keeping up on it and making sure you're training your folks when you make changes. That's really important too.
Yeah, to a couple of points that you already made, I mean, the law firms themselves are under scrutiny. It's not, these aren't things that are coming from them necessarily. I was at the American Bar Association's tech show recently, and security and passing their IT audit was a very hot topic. There was an entire session dedicated to that. And some of the info from that session was that 80% of the largest law firms have been breached, hacked since 2011. That's an astounding number. I was shocked by that. Law firms are going through the due diligence and an approval process and hiring their vendors. So it's not like they can just, pick their favorites anymore, or the person who dropped off donuts last week. They're having to really kind of put them through a process to make sure that all of their T's are crossed and I's are dotted when it comes to compliance that's coming down from their clients. They're requiring contracts with vendors. They're performing risk assessments and creating risk management plans. They're performing security audits internally, as well as with vendors that they're working with. So I don't know if we've kind of covered everything about compliance requirements, where those are coming from, and what it means going forward for process serving firms, what it means for them now and in the future. But is there anything else that you maybe wanted to touch on kind of how this is all trickling down and kind of where these requirements are coming from?
No, I think you hit that. It's definitely the law firm. I mean, they're spending an enormous amount of money themselves, almost to the point of not really being profitable anymore, because compliance has taken such a big piece of their productivity right now. So I feel at some point it's going to level off from them, but it's our industry. Third and fourth party vendor compliance is really where things are going to start to be heavily scrutinized. And you may not have been requested to do anything. You might be sitting there today thinking, oh my gosh, this doesn't pertain to me. But I would say the only thing I could suggest, particularly for the folks that have home offices and, or maybe just have a mobile office unit, this all might sound like stuff that will never come into play. But if you're utilizing a laptop and you're carrying around consumer data somehow, somewhere, I would just look to, just starting to tighten up maybe some of your business practices and how you keep your data and how you conduct your business, and would you be able to operate if there were, a natural disaster or something like that. I keep referencing that, but that comes up a lot, where the clients want to know that in the event of something were to happen, are you still able to process those files? So I know I can answer that question, but I often wonder, if I have hundreds of papers in play across our network, what does that really mean, and how could I manage that? So the more folks that are able to, put some of these practices into place, I think it'll just help our profession as a whole, because there is quite a bit of concern on how do you go about managing a network of contractors, of 1099 folks. How do you set forth best practices and code of conduct and things like that, and have people comply when they're essentially, an independent contractor? So that's where our vendor management policies come into play, and we have to have these agreements with people.
Right. We're starting to get some questions trickling in here, but I think that we'll get most of these answered as we continue here with kind of the plan of attack and the conversation here. A lot of it has to do with is there a checklist, or is there any kind of universal standards in the works? And that actually brings me to my next question. Are there standards in compliance?
Well, as far as standards, the law firms don't have standards yet from their clients, right? But if you look to a recent example I can cite is I was just at a law firm last week that they were saying, you know, 3 of the largest banks in the United States are their clients, and each of those banks individually have a separate set of compliance requirements where they, you know, have training webinars that they're asking the firms to have their employees do. And, you know, it all combined, it was like 8 hours of webinars, each on a different topic. Most of the topics didn't even pertain to the work that they were doing. So I think that industry is still working on setting a standard that they can all use, but they're not there yet. So then I started putting together just some common threads, you know, of questions that were being asked of us. So I do have what I would consider a core set of, or a starting point for folks that they can put into place. And if you have, you know, these core things, you'll have 90% of what's going to be required of you. And then I'm not going to say it's going to be all encompassing, but you'll be, you know, well on your way if you can get some of these things into play.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So I think I kind of know the answer to this, but the next question is, you know, if there are no standards, where do you think they will come from? Obviously, it's going to come from the first party that we're talking about here.
Right. I think that the core set of standards will come from, you know, I would hope that we as a profession or as an industry start somewhat self-regulating ourselves and understanding that, yes, we do need these things. Let's not take another 2 years to say, oh, this doesn't affect me. You know, it does affect you, and let's just put them into place, right? So I think some of it will just be from the industry itself, right? The lawyers will dictate a lot of what we need to have, but I think as an industry, we should be putting just some best practices into place, and knowing that, you know, when you choose a vendor that says they are compliant or have a compliance designation or something like that, then you know that they're ahead of the game with, you know, some basic practices, and we can get into that, you know, in detail.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the first. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think the first time that I heard the acronym CMS as it pertains to process serving was last year when we did ServeCon. You were a speaker there as well. And we had Joanne Needleman. She was the president of NARCA at the time. And as I said, it's the first time that I heard the term CMS. Can you tell the audience what a CMS is and how you went about starting to create yours?
Well, we started ours by, just like I said, we kept getting a series of questions that had a common thread to them. And, you know, and it would start off with, if you think of your physical office location, you know, from your security entrance, and do you have, you know, a locked facility or a sign-in mechanism for when visitors come. And again, it's back to protecting consumer data. So they want to make sure that you just don't have, you know, litigation documents just all willy-nilly in your office, and, you know, just anybody can come in and take a look at those documents. That you have some just secure practices that, you know, just starting with your entrance, and then, you know, are your computers, do you have passwords, and are they password protected? And if somebody punches it in too many times, will it lock them out, and things like that. So if your laptop perhaps was to get stolen, and all of that consumer data that you're carrying around, you know, is it protected? Do you have a smartphone policy, sort of along the same lines? You know, all of our emails in our smartphones, there's an enormous amount of data in that if somebody were to steal your phone, if you didn't have a way of scrubbing that or locking somebody out, you know, and things like that, that could be a data breach there. Just the way that you share information within your internal organization. So like an information sharing policy, those are very common to be asked, how do you handle that type of thing? You know, your physical document storage, how long do you retain your documents? If you're saying that you retain them, you know, and then if you dispose of them, how do you do that? Do you have a shredder or a shredding company that comes in and takes those documents away? All of our clients now are requiring us to have some type of shredding, you know, available to us. And then you know, we can go into detail about specific policies, but like I had mentioned earlier, it's not just having those policies, is do you have a way within your organization, and even if you're just a two-person shop, talking to the other person about what would we do, or how are we going to handle this, or you know, how are we going to protect our clients from this happening? It's just a way of training and implementing policies within your organization. That's a big one. And of course, everybody now wants you to have insurance. So you have to have some type of errors and omissions insurance for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that, just referencing the seminar that I went to at ABA Tech Show, these law firms can't even get insured unless they have these measures in place to pass their IT security audit. I don't know if either of you or either of us has said it out loud, but when we're saying CMS, just to be clear to the audience, we're talking about compliance management system here. So I was wondering what that acronym was. There is a question that kind of pertains to one of the things that you just touched on, hiring and training. I'm not sure 100% what these are, but maybe you have an idea, Paula. The question is do you think it is wise to train servers in FDCPA or have studies on Section 804? I can Google those if.
I think what they're saying is it wise to train your servers so that they don't violate FDCPA laws? And absolutely. You know, to that point, there are a few companies out there that will request that in addition to serving documents, they would like for us to get the debtor on the phone with the folks that they owe money to, and you know, to validate a certain series of questions with them. And in my opinion, that puts the process server right in the middle of you know, consumer, you know, I mean, in violation of that practice. So I mean, we don't do that type of work. So it is very important to train your servers on knowing, you know, the things that they can and cannot say, so that they are not violating that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's a theme of what we'll be talking about here as we get into some of the details of putting together your policies and procedures. Is what works for Green Tree may not work for ABC, you know, process company. You know, it depends on the type of work that you do. It depends on your size. It depends on the procedures and policies that you already have in place potentially. So.
Correct.
My next question is, as a small firm, as a one-person shop, would you suggest they start with compliance? Do they need a compliance management system? What are some potential actionable takeaways for our audience today?
Well, I would say yes. If we're talking about the small one-person, two-person shop, they can start today by just probably analyzing their current practices, and then asking themselves, you know, they may not have, like I had mentioned before, they may not be doing work directly for a law firm that requires it, but if they are receiving work in, if they are, you know, an agency that receives work anywhere from, you know, process serving companies across the country, they would want to start having a business continuity plan in place and making sure they have insurance. And you know, do you have all of your contact information printed out somewhere in case internet goes down. And a real biggie that I see in the industry, especially with the smaller firms, is their inability to operate if something happens to the internet in their office, or if they're beholden to their computer and their hard drive that sits in an office. If they don't have some type of software, database that is accessible through the web where you can go off-site and work anywhere. If there was some type of natural disaster and you needed to pick up on the fly and manage your business, and if that means manage yourself and be able to keep in contact with your clients, how would you go about that? Do you have your client list printed out and ready to go? And are you able to operate if something were to happen? And at least communicate with your clients on whatever's going on in your area. There's a lot of areas of the country that just got hit by a storm, and it's very unfortunate. And of course, people wouldn't expect you to be out serving papers, but they might expect, if you're okay, to be able to call and say, hey, I just want you to know I've got 15 of your papers. They're not going to get touched this week, but this is what's going on with us. It's just having the ability to keep in communication, and what would that look like? So if you don't have that written down, that's where I would start for the single person shop, and then as you grow, you can add some of these things on. As you add process servers to your network, as soon as you hire somebody, make sure that you've got a code of conduct or a best practices that you would like for your servers to adhere to when they're out in the field representing your firm, which you're in turn representing somebody else. So.
Yeah, you've touched on a lot of different elements here, and there have been a couple questions in regards to checklist or getting these materials after the fact. I know that you're going to reference some opportunities to get some more detailed materials as well as an event later this year, but just so the audience knows, we are going to summarize this webinar as concisely as we can, and try to set it up so that we have a nice checklist for you to at least start to think about when it comes to putting some of these materials together, some of these plans and policies together, things that you can, some things that are a little bit more detailed, that could be a policy or procedure, but also simple things like, to make sure you have passwords on all your computers. What happens if they go idle? Choosing, the right application that's, not going to rely on you to physically do backups and, not having to manage your own hardware when it comes to your data. I think, that's the stuff that that's really important for the small, kind of one-person shops or the smaller companies is, especially when it comes to technology, is taking a lot of that off of your hands, so you're not having to do some of these physical hardware maintenance or backups yourself. So we will be summarizing this in a post on ServeNow after the webinar is over. So looks like we do potentially have a question or two that I could throw your way right now, Paula, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
This one's probably well, I know it is a webinar all in itself because we've done one on it in the past, but isn't there a fine line between training a server and crossing the line between employee and independent contractor? I guess I'll just let you field that one.
I'm not sure what the fine line would be, other than if you're a contractor for anybody that you're accepting work from, there's going to be some best practices that company would require for you to do, and most of that for us just falls under code of conduct, and being professional when you're out there in the field, and not engaging the defendant or the consumer in dialogue that would violate any of FDCPA or anything like that. When you start getting into specifics like requiring a specific time, or we know where that fine line is with an employee versus a contractor. We say we will bring people into our network that are willing to, adhere to some best practices. And I think that those things are becoming industry standard. And I would be probably reluctant to work with somebody that felt otherwise. I don't know if there might be some folks out there that feel as if they are falling more into that employee category, but I think it can be done in a way that it's advantageous to both parties. It's a protection for the process server, really, to know that they've been handed a set of guidelines on how to conduct themselves professionally when they're out there serving court documents, and that's only going to help our industry.
Yeah. Well, I think for you as the third party, it's important for you to have a set of guidelines that that your subservers are going to be adhering to, and whether that's the full-time process server that serves for you right in the the city of Cincinnati, or it's the fourth party across the state. You need to make sure that there's continuity and consistency with the in-house server or with the fourth party that you're farming papers out to. Yeah.
I think that where we struggle is when we start sending work out of state, across country, and then requiring a company that may only get 5, 6, 7 papers a month from us to maybe sign some of these documents or what have you. But I hear that same issue coming from the law firm that might use outside counsel in a remote area of the state. So many of the firms here in Ohio cover a tri-state area, and they often don't have their own counsel represent them at a hearing. They might use an outside counsel, and those same folks are having to sign these very large compliance documents, and so I'm hearing from my clients that they're also struggling managing that network, and some of the same things that person that asked that question are coming up with them, like, why do we have to do this when we're only serving a couple of papers or things like that. So I think all of this will level out at some point, and it'll just be industry standard. If you're a tow truck driver and you want to represent AAA is going to give you a set of guidelines that they want you to adhere to. If you're even UPS uses independent contractors, and they wear a uniform and things like that. So, it'll all shake out.
It's a vetting process. Just like your clients are vetting the attorneys that represent them, you're having to represent the process servers that are, you're having to vet the process servers that are representing you when they're going out in the field and serving. So.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Interesting comment is someone said that they just had a site audit at their home by TLO, and they know that people are complaining about this, but she says she thinks it's okay. We should be responsible that our home offices are locked, file cabinets locked, computers secure. I guess and it kind of just brings up a question in my mind, should you be looking at the TLO site audit as maybe a model or a partial model for compliance when it comes to your business as a whole? Are those things that they're doing also things that you want to be looking at including in your compliance management system?
It's interesting that they reference that exact thing. We had that same site audit as well, and I wondered what that would look like if I had a home office. And to TLO's credit, the fact that they have found a creative way to still be able to engage with our community, the process server community, rather than say, you know what, we'll never be able to make sure that they are compliant with the things that we need for them to have into place. They got creative with it, and they use independent contractors throughout various cities to do these site audits. And I asked that guy a lot of questions when he was there, because I was thinking it's a great idea. to be able to utilize. So I didn't know if that guy was from a particular service, and I was thinking about incorporating that same site audit into our deal. We're not there yet, but I would like to be doing something like that, just to, be able to say everything that you check the box here on this piece of paper, you are in fact doing. And to their credit, they made it very passable for people. Like they want you to have a shredder bin and, locked filing cabinets and, just some basic things that would help them know that you are protecting consumer data, because that is a huge access point to, billions of records. So interesting, they didn't really look too much to our security IT, like in our computers, but they looked more to our physical office space when they were doing that site audit. But I thought most of their data is housed right in my laptop, but
Yeah, so it is interesting. I mean, I can see where a larger third party probably has a similar, as you're suggesting, you might have that process in place, maybe not now, but a year or two from now. But again, it becomes a challenge when, you still have that, say, 10% of papers that go across the US to, if you just have onesies and twosies in, Miami or Fort Lauderdale, you're not going to go through a site audit to make sure that they have all these things in place before you send out one or two papers.
But they may have where I see this going is they may have already put something in place for their local clients that they could easily pass along to us to assure us that yes, we are adhering to these best practices, and we have a core set of compliance. And I do know of a firm. It's a collection law firm that is performing site audits of their vendors, but they're doing it virtually, and they have some type of, I don't know enough about it, so don't anybody ask me any questions, but it's like face recognition software, and they're using, similar to this webinar situation, and they're, the way it was explained to me, or folks are logging in to their auditing system, and then they're taking it around their facility, and they're showing the auditor the things that they need to see or what have you to be compliant. So it's not an on-site, it's more of a virtual audit. That would be pretty cool.
Well, and I guess a comment that I have, and it leads me into my next question is, as you're starting to put these programs together, as you're starting to create these policies internally, it really becomes a marketing and a sales tool for you as a third or fourth party participant in this process. This is something that you should be, putting on your website and talking about in your materials and your communication and your presentation to potential clients. So I guess with that being said, what has being compliant done for you and your ability to sell new customers? I mean, I know just in talking to you that even before you went out and pursued business, you spent a significant amount of time just working on your compliance before you worried about revenue.
Correct. Because I knew in order to be in this arena, particularly if I was going after any of the work that, with folks in the default space, I knew I was going to have this compliance in place. So for me, without having it, I couldn't even get business from folks that I would consider my friends. It was just a necessity that we had to go down this road. But once we started off down that path, I was really grateful for it, because it opened my eyes to just, starting a business in 2015 at the height of what I would say is a compliance, awareness situation, was in a lot of ways, it helped us set up our best practices in our business in a way that we can be efficient and take advantage of some of the technology that's out there now that wasn't around, even just with software and your case management systems, and within, utilizing, a software. It's just everything has changed, but for the better. And I think maybe some of the folks that have been in business for a long time that are resistant to change, or, things are working, you're making money, you've got exit strategy 5 years down the road, and you may not be too motivated to do some of these things, but I think it's just going to be a requirement to stay relevant in this industry is to to do this. And I'm really glad that it was very overwhelming at first, but we just started plugging away. So, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing this today, is I just want to help others out there that are maybe hearing this or in this situation, or they're getting some of these RFPs across their desk and they don't know where to start or where to turn. I think there's going to be, in the upcoming months, just plenty of opportunity and resources available for people to jump on and, if they're serious about learning.
Right. So that, again, kind of leads us to the next portion of this. We've talked about some very specific things. We've talked about some kind of high level things, which could be either, we could probably talk for 2 hours about just little elements of being compliant, putting together a CMS. For someone looking to approach setting up a CMS within their own company or find more information about this topic, what are your suggestions? Where should they go to start this process?
There's a couple of things that I would suggest. I mean, first off, there's some. The NAPS conference is June 2nd through the 4th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and myself, along with Eric Vaness from Apex Legal, we sit on the compliance committee with NAPS. We're putting together an educational seminar, so it'll be an hour and a half, a deeper dive into specifics. I'm sure there'll be some templates of various policies handed out and things like that. I would say that would be a great thing to attend. And in addition to that, Green Tree Legal is going to be doing we have a consulting division for companies that are interested in learning more, taking a deeper dive. There's really no set thing that I could sit here and say, across the board, everybody needs to have, because some companies might have the first 5 things and then only need one of those things. And then another person might need everything. So it really requires some consulting. And then in addition to that, there would be, so if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you could just go to our website, greentreelegal.com, and my contact information is there. I'm also going to be doing a series of webinars similar to what you're doing here, but it will take one component and then it'll be a deeper dive into that piece. So for example, the first one is probably going to be, I talk a lot about business continuity plans. To me, that was the most daunting and overwhelming policy to put in place, but when it was broke down in real just basic context, I was able to get it done without it costing $1 bazillion. So I think that's an important document for folks to have. So we'll do a webinar on that, and then each month we'll have a new webinar on a particular policy that somebody might want to drill into and learn a little bit more about. And I'll probably start with the top 5.
That's great, and I assume you'll post these on your site?
Yes.
Yes. And how to register. And
yeah, exactly. I'll do it similar to, maybe you can teach me a few things about how you get people registered for your stuff. But
we'll do a webinar on marketing webinars.
Yeah, how to do a webinar.
Well, we could certainly recap some things if you'd like to, but I'll just reiterate that we're going to do as good of a job as we can at kind of summarizing all this on the ServeNowEDU section of our website. So that's something that we'll flesh out based on the notes that Paul and I put together and the conversation that we had today. So that will be available in the coming days, and all the attendees will be getting a notification of that. Just got a question from someone. I'm assuming this is in regards to your webinar series, Paula. Do you know when the webinars will be? Have you set a date for the first, or you said just the first one's in May sometime?
Yeah, the first one's going to be in May, and we haven't set the date yet, but within the next week I'll have information on our website, and then also we'll blast it social media, wise. So
And if you're following us on social media, we'll reshare that and make sure that if you're following us, that they'll know as well. So we'll stay on for a few more minutes if there's any other questions that the audience has for Paula. But in the meantime, Paula, I want to thank you for generously donating your time and your knowledge. I know, as I've said before, you spent a ton of time, resources, money, sleepless nights, focusing on compliance and kind of starting your company, starting your process service, legal support service company the way that you think a company should be started in 2015, 2016. So thank you for helping the audience, helping us, helping the profession. So I got another question?
Sure.
Let's see here. Question is there one place better than another to get all the needed training information? Sounds like we're a little bit fragmented right now, but really coming together with kind of following up on the notes from this webinar, going to your webinars, potentially attending the NAPS conference, and then down the road maybe even consulting with you on putting this together. I'm assuming that over time, as you do these webinars and you're training and you're helping, that we might see some guides formulate here.
Right. I mean, we are in such what I would call the early stages of, we literally just got through our own stuff. We're still just tightening things up. Even, just last month, we were still working on a few of our policies. And then this was sort of like the first event that I did publicly. And I've certainly talked to a number of folks who have called me, for stuff, but it's not there yet. But I would hope by mid-year we start to see, like you referenced, some like some manuals or just some training guides or checklists and things like that. I just wanted to make sure we had our stuff good. We got our first on-site audit conducted, and we did great, and just wanted to make sure we had all of the components, including the IT security piece, which was the last big one that we just did. So now it's just a matter of formulating this information and maybe bringing some other folks on the team that want to help and and to better our profession, because I really believe that we shouldn't compete on who has better compliance, right? I think we should all level the playing field as it relates to compliance. There's lots of things we can compete on, customer service-oriented type stuff. I just don't feel it's necessary to hold those cards close to your chest when it relates to compliance, because if we make it easy and accessible and help and want to train and get everybody up to speed, we're all going to be in a better place for it. That's my belief anyways. I don't know if others believe like me, but that's the goal here. So.
Well, especially now, it's in its infancy. We've, really only had serious conversations about compliance in the last couple of years or so. And I would imagine the percentage of companies that are even working on a CMS is small, probably less than 10% of the market right now. You may have, more reliable numbers there, but this is something that I think as a group, the industry really just needs to embrace for the betterment of process serving and legal support as a whole. So just kind of echo what you're saying there.
True.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's see, we might have another question. There has been talk from some larger companies trying to require some sort of training or certification for process servers. Is there any formal movement in this direction? Who would be the governing body? Any thoughts on that outside of what we've already talked about today?
I'm sorry, can you read that again?
Sure. There's been talk from some of the larger companies trying to require some sort of training or certification for process servers. is there any formal movement in this direction, and who would be the governing body? So I think it just goes back to standards. Is there going to be a governing body that says these are the standards that you need to adhere to if you want to be deemed certified as a process serving firm?
I don't know if it's going to be a governing body. I think that there'll be, some standards set forth that as the industry agrees that these are the core, there may be some certifications that come down that say, okay, you've attended these things and you have these policies in place. There might be some type of certification process. I know from the individual companies, it goes back to the same thing as the banks are doing for the law firms, right? So you have each of those banks sending those webinar compliance videos to their law firms saying you must watch these things. I think that each of the larger companies, and not just the large companies, myself included, I'm looking to having similar training modules for servers in our network. And rather than have you read a 10-page document on a code of conduct, you might just take an online quiz that says you understand what code of conduct is. So it's probably going to get a little fragmented, I would think, because each company have their thing that they're going to want from their network. But as far as a governing body, I'm not sure how that's going to shake out yet.
I guess my opinion is if you can, take our summary of this webinar and go to some of Paula's future webinars, I think you're doing a really good job of getting 75% of the way there. I think the things that you have already done for your company and some of the obvious things that you can be doing from a security perspective as a process serving firm, you're doing the majority of what you need to do. There's going to be, and maybe you're even getting more than 75% done, maybe it's 90, but there's still going to be those requirements from each and every different client that's going to want something a little bit different.
It's true.
Awesome. Well, I think the questions have slowed down and we're getting really close to our time here. So again, Paula, thank you very much. And I want to thank all the attendees for their time and their questions as well. All the attendees will be receiving an email with a link to the recorded video of this webinar, as well as the summarized notes. As I said before, you may also visit ServeNow.com and click on the EDU link on the homepage, not only to get this recording, but past ServeNowEDU recordings, and you can sign up for future ones as well. Paula, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.